If you can figure out what you're committed to, then you can figure out how to move forward in your life. I have no idea anymore, like, what I want anybody to take from anything. Okay. But that's okay. I think that that's actually a good place to be in. But what inspired it, I'm not sure about that either, except that I knew that there were certain kinds of figures and forms that I wanted to look at and think about. That I've been, really interested in vaudeville theater for many years, and interested in the construction of spaces. And so this kind of gave me like an opportunity to play. There's this really great saying that within seriousness there's very little room for play, but within play there's tremendous room for seriousness. And so I'm trying to figure out these sort of platforms in which to play, and to play with historical figures, and to play with historical circumstance, and that allow for me to engage the world in a very abstracted form in order to get at something that is more deeply realized. I'm an artist, but I'm interested in the historical past as well as the historical present too, and how the past has a kind of hold on the present, how it shapes us. So those are interesting ideas, right? How to deal with that, how to think about Lincoln. I've been interested in dealing with Lincoln for 10 years now, maybe even more. So it was like a perfect moment to think about Lincoln as a character. I've done work around the Civil War. I've done work around civil rights. I've done, of course, those two things are historically linked. There would be no civil rights movement without the Civil War. I mean, there would be no Civil War in a way without Lincoln. I mean, it was just all of these sort of things that these sort of pieces that I needed to pull together. And so really the work comes out of that. And then there's this link between the historical past with the way in which women are constructed, the way in which women are dealt with or have been dealt with, that I really wanted to play with as well. And so the piece is sort of really in two parts, if I can be bold. The first section, the longest section, really looks at historical figures and our response to that historical past. And the second part really looks at women. And so I suppose in my mind there's really no way that you can really break the movement, the social movement of African Americans, of the civil rights movement, without looking ultimately at the movement of women or the movement of gays in the country. The way in which they push is deeply rooted in the way in which the civil rights movement pushed. Those strategies that came out of that movement were very, very important, both for women in their struggle for equal rights, as well as for gays in their struggle for equal rights at this point. Really interesting stuff. Well, I don't actually and totally remember, except that I knew that I wanted to, because I was interested in theatrical form and vaudeville, that I wanted to have something that was removed, historically removed, so that it wasn't real. I didn't want to deal with realism. And that technique, that sort of early German technique, was very important to this figure that I've developed, this performance figure, my clown figure, my Faustian figure. So I think in thinking about Faust, then I started looking at sort of early German theater, and it was through looking at early German theater that I arrived at thinking about this idea of doing a Pepper's Ghost and really wanting to experience the physicality of that. And, you know, it's very interesting as you sort of think about technology. We were talking about that just a bit ago. You know, that on the one hand, we have these sort of amazing technology, you know, cameras that do everything, but paint your face, you know, and then you have, which is sort of wonderful, but then you have these really brilliant early forms of presentation that had to do with a little bit of candlelight and a little bit of trickery in order to make something really wonderful, and so there's something about, you know, using really simple forms that appeal to me. Using a Rolly, you know, with black and white film that, you know, that I traded for a car when I was in undergraduate school. I love this camera. I love sort of stripping things down to their essence, so that there's something still very tactile about it that I think is really exciting. So yeah, using the Pepper's Ghost and creating this little theater and creating this illusion, this sort of feeling of depth, you know, to view a history that is passing and a history that is fading seemed to be an appropriate thing to do. Yeah, it just depends. I mean, you know, sometimes in the working on a single project, I do both. It just depends on what's needed. You know, like there are moments when I'm very interested in how, because I love working with musicians, you know, and I can't imagine really having music with still photographs. I mean, it's just really corny to me, really tacky. But you know, but I'm interested in voice, and I'm interested in music, and I'm interested in working with composers, and so working in video gives me a chance really to do that, and then I get a chance to push all these people around and tell everybody what to do. And you know, usually if I'm doing stills, a lot of the times I'm in the photographs myself, but often when I'm making video, I'm not. You know, I get a chance to work with lots of other talented people, and so it brings out this other part of, you know, of me that I need to experience. And I think also, again, with sort of, you know, new technologies where, again, the camera does so much, and we use, you know, digital printers, and, you know, like my whole relationship to photography is changing in a way that there are times that I really don't like. The sort of physicality of being in the dark room and making is, you know, or not going into the dark room and shaking that tank in order to get, like, you know, a beautifully processed image. All those things sort of make it more imperative for me to be involved more actively in how something is made across the board, because the digital seems to be pushing me back as an artist, right? In one way, advancing me, absolutely, and that I can have, like, instantaneous images. In another way, that it's instantaneous really bothers me. And there's nothing still like silver. There is nothing like it. And recently, I had these two photographs on my studio wall. One evening, you know, I always work late. One was this beautiful inkjet that I just made, and another just happened, a silver print just happened to be on my wall from something. And it was, and I turned off the light in my studio, and I couldn't see the digital photograph anymore, but the silver print was still illuminating, even in the darkness. It was just, it's like, and that's the difference. And that's, you know, like, there's nothing like that silver, that patina, that quality, that essence that speaks, you know, that way in which light is reflected back into the world, I think is really exciting. Well, it tells me everything. My body tells me everything, so I don't know what to do outside of that. But I think that, you know, the thing that I'm, you know, that I'm really interested in is that, you know, being a woman really holds you back too, because we're just not valued in the same way. And there's just no way of getting around that reality, you know. So, you know, I mean, I know many of the boys. I know them and I appreciate them. I'm not really trying to, I have absolute respect for what men do. I love men. They just don't have a lot of respect for what I do. I mean, you know what I mean? It's a man's world. And so the way in which work is collected, the way it's used, the way it's discussed, the way it's theorized, the way it's contextualized, the way institutions build monuments to it is absolutely essential and really important. And I realize to the extent that women still don't have that platform. I don't care if they're photographers or painters or writers or dancers or strippers or whores, right? Right? I mean, they just don't get the same amount of play. And I think that that's, you know, what my work continues in some weird way to always be about. It is always, I think, about understanding our relationship to power and how to engage it, how to critique it, how to unpack it. So even as I appreciate what many, many artists have done, men, etc., I am still critiquing aspects of power that give power only and primarily to men or to whites. So for instance, it really, one of the things, the way that I started to think about this a few years ago, when I was doing work around modernism, was to understand that to the extent that African Americans, women, Latino Americans, and so forth, are removed from notions of modernism, is to the extent that they're marginalized, right? Because you're not involved in the central dialogue. And so as long as you're considered not a part of the central dialogue, it's to the extent that you will always be placed on the margin. And so over and over and over, I don't give a shit what's going on and what's happening and how the work is being, quote, understood. Usually it's understood in relationship to questions of blackness. And blackness is marginalized. It is not a part of the central debate. And there's no way that you can present a black character and have them be a part of the central debate. So that's something that I'm always trying to figure out how to unpack, how to use this frame as a representation for any number of things outside and other than its blackness. But for the most part, blackness can only stand for itself. In the same way that often only women can stand for themselves. So that if the experience is, quote, a female experience, or it's a black experience, it can't stand in for a more broad human experience, which I think is a serious problem, and one that we have to really work through, you know? But it's very deep. But I think that's this idea that, you know, that we are, you know, that we are forced to the margins of modernism is a serious problem, and that until people are really willing to deal with that in a really active and wonderful and engaged way will be the extent to which we're all marginalized. I don't see myself in that way at all. I mean, I'm really honored that, you know, that young men, and I hope, you know, young women and men feel the same way about the work. I would like to know that that's true. But I think it's just a matter of just working. I mean, you know, I have a sense that I need to be engaged in the world in a certain kind of way, and that commitment matters to me, and responsibility generally matters to me, that I am responsible for my historical age, for my historical moment matters to me, and that I have perhaps a way of engaging that raises questions in a way that pushes our lives forward. But I start with me and what I'm trying to negotiate, and I do have a sense, of course, that it has meaning for a larger public. But I think that, you know, the other day I was thinking, how do I make something that's like, you know, that people will like? I don't know how to do that. So I was commissioned by the University of Massachusetts at Amherst to do a project on W.E.B. Du Bois. Some people say Du Bois, but in the United States they say Du Bois. And, you know, black political leader, figure, founder of the NAACP, you know, very significant figure in American social history. And so I thought, you know, what would be like a really interesting way of remembering him and engaging a larger audience in participating with me around him. And so I thought, I don't want to do an exhibition of photographs necessarily because, you know, they go up, they come down, and they go then in a box and nobody remembers them, and, you know, it's so fast. So then I started thinking about roses, and I thought, oh, I could name a flower after him. So I've just come back from the Royal Peony Society, where I've had a really beautiful peony named for W.E.B. Du Bois. It's called the Peony of Hope, and it will be made available commercially in the next few months. It'll be, you know, deliverable in September, and everybody can have the Peony of Hope in their garden. I think that you have to figure out what you're committed to. If you can figure out what you're committed to, then you can figure out how to move forward in your life. And it will definitely be difficult because there's nothing easy about my life, not by a long shot. I don't care if I'm showing in, you know, the Guggenheim or the Met. My life is really tough in a lot of ways, and the work is really tough in a lot of ways. But it also gets me up every morning, and it pulls me into my studio every morning. And so I think that that's really the most important thing, of finding the thing that you love, of finding the thing that you're committed to. Because if you can do that, then you have a key to your life, and it will pull you through very, very, very difficult times.